Okay, so what if the most glamorous industries, the powerful figures we see all the time, on screen, in business, what if there's a whole hidden reality just bubbling under the surface?
It's a really fascinating question, isn't it? Because, yeah, often what we see is just, well, the polished version, maybe
Yeah.
even a complete illusion sometimes.
Exactly. So welcome everyone to the deep dive. This is where we take the source material you give us and really try to uncover the surprising truths underneath.
Uh-huh.
Today, we're diving into some really rich insights. We're looking at the hidden dynamics in Bollywood, the big strategic moves of the world's wealthiest billionaires, and also how modern relationships are changing.
Yeah, get ready. It's kind of a shortcut to getting informed, We've got surprising facts, interesting connections, maybe a few aha moments about what's really driving things.
Right. We want you to understand not just what's happening, but like why it actually matters to you.
Exactly. So where should we start? Bollywood.
Let's do it. Let's unpack Bollywood. It seems all glitz and glamour, but the sources we look at suggest there's this whole unseen financial script happening with some pretty unexpected players involved.
That's right. The material points to this claim that a lot of Bollywood funding actually gets rerouted from Dubai, and often it seems through Pakistani agents.
Okay, Dubai, Pakistani agents. That's not just about money then, is it? It sounds like it's about control, leverage.
Precisely. Leverage is the key word. I mean, think about it. If you've handled, say, 200, 300 crores over years, that's what, like 25, $35 million US?
Yeah, roughly.
Okay, so handling that kind of money means these agents supposedly have compromising information. Dirt, basically.
Right.
The report suggests they could just leak one small detail, and that's it. Career finished. It paints a picture of, well, significant hidden power.
So does that connect to why sometimes, during political tensions between India and Pakistan, Bollywood seems strangely quiet?
The sources definitely suggest that, yeah. This silence, when you might expect some strong opinions, could stem from a couple of fears.
Okay.
One, obviously not wanting to tick off the huge fan base across the border. But two, maybe more importantly, the fear of exposing these really complex, maybe sensitive financial deals.
Hmm. So it's like a glittering facade built on something pretty shaky underneath.
Very delicate foundations, yeah. And the hidden stuff, it doesn't stop with money. The sources get into a darker side of the glamour, too, concerning health, aesthetics, particularly drug access. It sounds quite shocking, actually.
Drug access, how so?
Well, it describes this really disturbing practice. Apparently, big film stars might send their peons and servants, their assistants, basically to maximum government hospitals in Mumbai.
Government hospitals. Why not private clinics? Wouldn't that be more discreet?
You'd think so, right? But the motive, according to these reports, is exactly to prevent leaks. A servant getting minor dosages of drugs, maybe stuff meant for patient recovery, through the back door, it keeps the star's name out of it.
Wow. Avoids the private records that could get out.
Exactly. It sounds like a way to bypass ethical practices, all driven by this intense fear of exposure in the industry.
That's, yeah, unsettling. And then there's the whole body image thing, the pressure. Our sources talked about hard maxing or look maxing, cosmetic surgeries.
Oh, yeah, that's a huge part of it, often completely denied. The reports claim something like 90% of Bollywood actresses over 35 have had some kind of surgery.
90%.
Yeah.
But they mostly deny it publicly.
Right, which creates this, like, almost impossible standard of beauty. It's manufactured.
And it's not just the celebrities feeling this pressure, is it? Does it affect regular people too?
Totally. The sources mention a 45% spike in ordinary people wanting these surgeries since around 2018. Think about hair transplants agencies seeing earnings jump by $2 million per month.
Yeah.
But here's the really scary part. The sources mentioned 3 engineers died recently after procedures like these, and apparently 2 of them went to good doctors. It just shows the risks, risks that often get glossed over in this chase for the perfect look.
That's tragic. And it hits young people too, right? Especially young guys trying to get those, like, superhero physiques.
Yes, the steroid abuse among 16, 17-year-olds is a major worry. They're trying to look like a 55-year-old actor with 8-pack abs.
Which is just not realistic without something extra.
Exactly. Scientifically, it's not possible unless with extraordinary genetics, the sources say, and the health costs are severe. We're talking by the age of 21, they're losing their reproductive efficiency.
Oh, my God.
There was even this leaked roundtable conference discussion where an actor admitted how bad taking performance enhancers felt. Said it feels like shit, basically.
So they know it's bad, but the pressure.
The pressure seems immense. It overrides ethics, health. It really shows the brutal hidden cost of maintaining that image.
It's a manufactured reality with devastating consequences. And this whole show-off culture, it goes beyond just looks.
It seems so. There's a quote from the actress Kalki saying something like, 95% of people can't afford a duplex apartment, but still they are owning a BMW and Mercedes just for show.
While living in tiny apartments, like a 1RK or a 1BHK.
Exactly. And think about the financial strain that creates. Living way beyond your means just for appearances.
Leads to debt, I imagine, maybe worse.
Yeah, significant debt. And the sources suggest that strain can sometimes lead people down the path of substance abuse, trying to cope with keeping up the facade. It's like a hidden cycle.
Wow. Okay, so beyond all that, the sources also touch on a creative decline in Bollywood.
That's another point raised, yeah. A noticeable lack of original scripts. Most of the big hits are apparently copied from South Indian films.
Interesting. And people are moving to streaming platforms, right? OTT. Less folks in cinemas.
Definitely. That shift to OTT and fewer people actually going to theaters, it's hitting hard. Even the biggest names, the top producers, are reportedly having to sell stakes in their companies.
Really? Selling off parts of their business.
Yeah, and even starting to work with a lot of influencers for a show, presumably to cut costs and reach audiences differently.
That's a massive change. It shows how much the whole landscape is being disrupted.
Fundamentally, the old power structures seem to be shifting.
Okay, let's switch gears. Beyond Bollywood, there's this other world of hidden strategies. The billionaires' playbooks. You know, the moves that reshape entire industries. Let's start with Mukesh Ambani. The sources kick off with a pretty bold statement about him.
They do. It basically says, no one can rise in our country without political support, which really sets the stage, suggesting that at that level, political ties aren't just helpful, they're essential.
Right. And a key example of his strategic thinking is the Jio-Hotstar merger. How is that such a big deal, such a masterstroke?
Well, it was multi-layered. First, they got the IPL cricket rights, huge draw, translated it into 12 languages, got people hooked, created addiction, basically.
Okay.
Then they offered it super cheap, like Rs 1,000, 3,000 a year. Even though the actual cost, the AWS server cost per user, watching maybe 38 matches could be way higher, like Rs 13,000, 914,000 per month.
Wait, that's a huge loss per user. How do you make that work? And what about monopoly rules, the Competition Commission of India?
Ah, see, that's where the, let's say, strategic navigation comes in. The CCI rule says no company should get over 50% market share in a segment after a merger.
Right.
So they presented the numbers like this. 13 crore Hotstar users out of 55 crore OTT users total among 70 crore smartphone users. Looks well under 50%, right?
Okay, yeah, that math seems to work, but you're implying there's a catch.
Well, the sources suggest the reality is different. If the average person has like 2.9 OTT subscriptions on their phone,
Which is common, yeah.
then the actual number of unique OTT users isn't 55 crore, it's closer to 19 crore.
Ah. So 13 crore out of 19 crore is way over 50%?
Exactly. The suggestion is the filing might have used old statistics to get the deal approved. It's less about breaking rules, maybe, and more about bending them, shaking them to your advantage.
Wow, that's some next-level maneuvering. What about making the actual shows and movies? How are they cutting costs there compared to, say, Netflix?
They're apparently making series for under Rs 1 crore, which is tiny compared to Netflix's maybe Rs 30, 40 crore budgets. By using YouTubers, big names on YouTube who bring their own audience. This slashes costs because the main expense usually is the star fees.
So the YouTubers become the stars, basically.
Yeah.
And they probably cost less.
Way less. They might take 20, 40 lakh or even do barter deals just for the exposure on Jio's huge platform. It reduces the cost of customer acquisition, too, because the YouTubers promote it to their own followers.
Smart. A whole ecosystem. Okay, and then Ambani also bought Campa-Cola, that old 90s soda brand. How does that fit in?
Yeah, acquiring that almost dead brand for apparently just 25, 30 crores was another clever move.
Okay, why?
They targeted Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities, places where the big guys, Pepsi and Coke, maybe aren't quite as dominant, and brand loyalty isn't as fierce.
Right, easier to break in. And what was the strategy there, the customer psychology angle?
Volume. They offered double the amount of cola for 20 rupees, triple for 40 rupees compared to competitors.
Ah, so much more bang for your buck.
Exactly. The insight seems to be that for the competition, a lot of the price is tied up in brand endorsement paying huge stars. Campa-Cola skipped that, focused on volume, and appealed directly to value.
Makes sense. Okay, from Ambani's calculated moves, let's jump to someone who seems different. Elon Musk.
Yeah.
The sources even hint at like a genetic thing with him.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. They share these anecdotes about his family, like his grandparents just deciding to fly a small plane from South Africa to Australia.
Seriously.
And his grandfather apparently walked 10,000 kilometers in a year. It suggests there's this inherent boundary-pushing, adventurous streak in the family DNA, maybe?
And Musk himself showed signs early on. Childhood genius stuff.
Definitely seems like it. Reading the entire encyclopedia by age 8. Finishing a 60-hour coding course in 3 days.
Okay, that's not normal.
And selling his first video game, Blaster, for $500 at 13. It puts to a mind that's just wired differently.
And then there's his politics. He shifted quite dramatically, didn't he? And he holds grudges.
Oh, yeah. He supported Democrats for years, 2008 to 2020, roughly. The big trigger for the switch seems to have been the COVID lockdown.
How so?
Well, Democratic leaders shut down industries. Musk felt he had safety protocols in place, and it really angered him. That's when you saw the red pill tweet, Ivanka Trump replying.
Right, I remember that.
And apparently getting Tesla banned from an auto expo by the Biden administration really bruised his ego. These things seem to turn into long-term strategic motivators for him.
And the revenge part. He plays the long game.
He really does. The sources mention it took him 12 years to get back at a company that short-sold Tesla back in 2008.
12 years. How did he do it?
By tweeting against GameStop, which apparently hit that old adversary hard, driving them towards bankruptcy. It shows how personal feelings at his level can become these calculated, market-moving strategies.
Wild. And now he's had a Doji E. What's that?
Department of Government Efficiency. His goal, apparently, is to save $2 trillion by getting rid of 92 out of 428 U.S. agencies.
And many of those agencies.
And ones that had sued him in the past. So, yeah, it looks like a very direct counterattack against bureaucratic hurdles and old opponents.
His actual ventures are just as ambitious. AI, Neuralink, Starlink, SpaceX.
He's everywhere, pushing limits. Involved early with DeepMind, then OpenAI with Sam Altman for ChatGPT, left those due to, like, investment conflicts.
So he started his own.
Yep, XAI and Grok. He wants control. Neuralink, the brain chip idea, apparently came about because he's bored of texting.
Seriously?
Yeah, wants a coin-sized chip so you can text or control things with your thoughts. They even showed a paralyzed person playing chess using it.
That's mind-blowing. Straight out of science fiction. And Starlink. Internet from space.
Right. He slashed the cost of satellites from maybe RS-1 Kuro down to RS-1 LEC just to shake things up and create competition for traditional internet.
And SpaceX itself was born out of ego.
Seems like it. Russia wouldn't sell him rockets for his Mars ambition, so he decided to build his own. It all seems driven by this mix of huge vision, needing control, and, yeah, a powerful ego.
Speaking of ego, the Mark Zuckerberg feud, that was something else.
Oh, yeah. Classic billionaire clash. A SpaceX rocket launch apparently blew up Mark Zuckerberg's Facebook server, a $200 million satellite, I think.
Ouch.
So Zuckerberg deleted the Tesla and SpaceX Facebook pages. Musk's response challenged him to a cage fight.
You can't make this stuff up. His personal life sounds just as out there.
Sources mention 12 children, but he lives alone in a tiny 380 square foot place and married the same woman 3 times. There's even a note about a possible mental disorder, perhaps fueling some of this intensity.
That's a lot. And Tesla itself wasn't an easy ride, was it?
Not at all. The first car, the Roadster, apparently struggled for approval for years, 2003 to 2008. But eventually, he promised shareholders a 10x return.
And delivered.
Actually delivered 15x, according to the sources. Got that massive $58 billion compensation package. Even buying Twitter, now X, seems part of a larger plan to own media, influence politics. His Trump support is very public now.
Okay, let's pivot back to India, but stay with business empires.
Yeah.
The Bajaj legacy. It's more of a quiet domination, right? But built on incredible resilience.
Absolutely. The Bajaj story is fascinating. Started with Jamnalal Bajaj, who was actually a Gandhiji's freedom fighter, founded Bajaj Trades.
But it didn't start smoothly.
No, they initially tried electronics, but failed. Blamed on Chinese illegal imports flooding the market, and also the license raj, those heavy government restrictions back then that made business tough.
So they had to pivot.
Right. His son shifted to two-wheelers, launched the Bajaj Cheetah scooter, and it just took off. An unbelievable craze.
I remember hearing about the waiting lists.
Yeah, 10-year waiting periods. It was so valuable it was even considered a dowry item in weddings. The license raj actually held back production. They could have sold even more.
But then competition arrived. That always forces change.
It does. An Italian company partnered with LML to bring in the Vespa. It was quieter, lighter, more fuel efficient, a real challenger.
So how did Bajaj respond? Rahul Bajaj.
He came up with a master plan, shifted focus hard towards motorcycles, bikes like Splendor and Pulsar, aimed squarely at the common man.
Why that segment specifically?
He realized that for most people, cars were still unaffordable. No one could afford cars, basically. So dominate the affordable, practical two-wheeler market. It was a brilliant strategic move.
And they kept strengthening their position. Acquisitions.
Exactly. They took over KTM, got the popular Duke bikes, then moved into the bigger bike segment, dominating Triumph for the 400cc plus range.
So the key was adapting, sticking to their niche.
Pretty much. They learned from failure. They tried the four-wheeler market and failed, according to the sources. So they doubled down, decided to stick to two-wheelers and three-wheelers.
And became the biggest player.
The biggest player in those specific segments. It's a great lesson in resilience, knowing your strengths and focusing your efforts. Quite different from the tech disruption model.
Definitely. Okay, from business strategies, let's turn to something maybe more personal, but just as dramatic.
Go.
The shifts in modern relationships. The sources start with some really eye-opening stats about divorce.
Yeah, they do. There's this survey I mentioned. 41% of married people believe you can find true love twice.
Oh, wow, nearly half.
And maybe even more striking, 45% of women admitted to digitally dating someone else, even while married.
Digitally dating, so online connections, affairs.
Presumably, yeah. These numbers definitely suggest something significant is changing under the surface of traditional marriage.
So what's driving it? What do the sources point to as the key reasons for rising divorce rates?
Well, several things. One interesting factor mentioned is broader societal openness, like the decriminalization of Section 377, the old law regarding same-sex relationships.
How did that impact heterosexual divorce rates?
The sources suggest it led to a 40% increase in usage of apps for same-sex connections. The implication is maybe some people were in heterosexual marriages because they felt they had no other choice or weren't fully aware of their own desires. That openness might be a factor.
Interesting connection. What about arranged marriages? Still dominant in India, right?
Hugely. Like 90% of marriages in India are arranged, and the sources are pretty blunt about it, calling it complete gambling.
Gambling, why?
Because you often don't know the person's history, their real interests, it's rolling the dice, and often incompatibility just surfaces later on.
Makes sense. But women's independence must be a huge factor, too.
Oh, absolutely crucial. Women are increasingly independent financially and socially. They don't have to tolerate bad situations, abuse, or just deep unhappiness the way previous generations might have felt they had to.
So they're setting boundaries.
Yeah.
Choosing themselves.
Exactly. Setting boundaries, seeking peace. They're often not self-reliant in the past, the sources note. So is more divorce a bad thing, or is it actually a sign of healthier boundaries and more autonomy? It's a complex question.
Yeah, it really is. What about legal changes, like decriminalizing adultery?
That's mentioned too, the Supreme Court decision. For some people, it might have created a sense of openness, making affairs seem less legally risky, perhaps contributing to the trend.
And materialism. Does that play a role?
The sources suggest it does. A heavy focus on only money can lead to loneliness, a lack of real emotional connection, because, beyond a certain point, money just won't matter for actual happiness in a relationship.
Right, that rings true. Okay, but we can't talk about modern relationships without talking about social media, can we? It seems to loom so large.
It really does. And one big way is how it fuels comparison culture, constantly seeing idealized versions of other people's relationships.
Leading to unrealistic expectations for your own partner.
Totally. Expecting your partner to love like Shah Rukh Khan, who, let's be real, gets paid 60 crores to act that way on screen.
A good point.
Or wanting them to look like some K-pop drama star, ignoring genetics, ignoring the fact that those stars have teams managing their appearance 24/7.
It's also filtered. You see the happy selfie, not the argument that happened 5 minutes before.
Exactly. Everything is filtered. Instagram shows everyone is happy. It hides the 7 hours of depression that might come before that 1-hour screen appearance, as one source puts it.
And this curated reality, this performance, it has real consequences.
Devastating ones sometimes. The sources mention this really tragic case, a girl who apparently committed suicide just because her follower count started dropping from like 2,000 down to 1,000.
Oh, that's heartbreaking. It shows how much self-worth gets tied up in this virtual validation.
It really does. And it proves that online life isn't real life. You see these influencers, these YouTubers with the perfect couple pages.
Yeah, the hashtag couple goals stuff.
And then you hear they've gotten divorced. It just highlights the disconnect. Plus, social media makes it incredibly easy to contact anyone, which can definitely fuel affairs or fantasies, blurring relationship lines even further.
So, pulling all this together,
Mhm.
Bollywood's hidden scripts, the billionaire strategic plays, the shifting sands of relationships. What's the takeaway for us listening?
Well, we've peeled back quite a few layers today on funding secrets, health issues in glamour industries, the sometimes ruthless genius of business leaders, and these deep societal shifts affecting how we connect with each other.
Right.
So maybe the provocative thought to leave you with is this. How much of what we see presented as success or happiness, whether it's a Bollywood movie, a corporate giant, or even a relationship online, how much of that is actually a carefully built narrative?
A constructed reality.
Yeah. And if it is, what does that mean for the expectations we set for ourselves, for our own lives, for the companies and institutions around us? How do we separate the facade from the reality?
That's a great question to ponder. What surprised you the most today? What hidden reality or clever strategy will you be thinking about differently after this deep dive?